Alex, let me just ask you, from a governance standpoint, from a leadership standpoint right now, what happens?
From a leadership standpoint, the president remains the president. If it ever happened that he were incapable of executing his tasks, Mike Pence becomes the president. But the statistical likelihood of any of that happening is very low. Let's be very clear right off the bat. The odds remain, from a health standpoint, in the president's favor, even at his age.
So yes, and we've been talking about the risk factors which are heightened because of 74 and some medical issues as well. But it's all very much laid out what would happen. Vice President Pence, we were talking about Nancy Pelosi second. Beyond that, Nancy Pelosi saying she hasn't been contacted by the White House, but that chain of leadership and command is very much prescribed and is in place. So beyond that, though, what do you think, Alex, about what the impact will be on the election and the campaign? I mean, what if he can't even finish it? That's really your hypothesis to your online piece.
Well, that's an entirely different story. The United States government has a very clear plan of succession. The United States election law is a mess. It's not clear. And this election system, like it needed a lack of clarity right now, or additional chaos, like it needed a hole in the head. This entire year has been chaotic. You have lawsuits all over the country over ballot access issues. But now, if again, speaking very hypothetically here, if the president were incapable of finishing the campaign, and and this is something a lot of people have been wondering. If you look at Google Trends searches last night, just skyrocketed with people asking what happens if the president can't compete on election day. So if that occurs, there are a few potential remedies. None of them are easy. The first one is the Republican Party, through its rules, names a new candidate. Now, that could potentially be done quickly. The only problem is you'd have to reprint ballots, and ballots are already out. I think apparently 2 million people have already voted in this election. There have been long lineups. The ballots are in. And I don't know how you can go back and change the balloting at this point. So that's probably a no-go. Solution number 2 is you turn it over to the Electoral College after the election. So you continue with the president's name on the ballot, and then you figure out who the president is after November 3rd.
Can you just talk about how much of an October surprise this is?
Sure. I mean, it's monumental. I mean, last week, the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think, was one of the largest things I've ever seen this close to an election in my own life covering politics. Not aware the last week that you might have even potentially a bigger story the week later. It's just it never ends here. But when I was going to just complete a thought on the Electoral College, because I think it's an important thing to sort of walk through for a second.
Okay.
People hear about it all the time. Because they hear 29 electoral votes in Florida, they hear about 20 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. They think about it from an electoral standpoint. But the Electoral College actually is a formal mechanism enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, and it basically meets a few weeks after Election Day in December to pick a president. And what election law experts have written about this potential scenario is you might have a situation where if a president could not complete the election or passed away before Election Day, you would then have the Electoral College naming the preferred candidate, the slates of Electoral College electors in a whole bunch of different states naming the preferred candidate of the Republican Party if the previous Republican candidate won the election. It's very unclear. And what makes matters even more complicated is a bunch of states have laws that force electors in their own state to only pick the person who was on the ballot and got the most votes in that state. It's exceptionally unclear. And like I said, it's just more chaos in a country that's had a fair share of it.
Alex, I thank you very much for being part of our broadcast this morning, and just direct people to your piece if you want to have that little primer on all of that analysis and scenarios that Alex has laid out for you. It's at CBCNews.ca. Our Alex Panetta.